It's Saturday morning in 1995, and the Zellers at Scarborough Town Centre is already packed. The automatic doors whoosh open every few seconds, releasing waves of families into the bright fluorescent aisles. Kids clutch their allowance, heading straight for the toy department. Teenagers browse the music section where CD singles cost $3.99. Parents push carts toward housewares, where everything's on sale because at Zellers, the lowest price is the law. Near the entrance, Zeddy the Bear, that cheerful mascot on every shopping bag, welcomes shoppers with his red bow tie and permanent smile. The smell of fries and gravy wafts from the Zellers family restaurant, where seniors are already claiming their favorite booths, coffee cups steaming. Behind the lunch counter, staff in red aprons flip burgers and pour endless refills. It's not fancy food, but it's familiar. It's ours. This scene played out in over 350 locations from St. John's to Victoria. Zellers was everywhere Canadians lived. It employed 35,000 people. It generated over $4 billion in annual sales. For 3 generations, Zellers was where Canadian families shopped for school supplies, winter coats, birthday toys, and kitchen gadgets. It was the default, the reliable choice, the Canadian option. Fast forward to January 2013. The same Scarborough Town Centre location sits dark. Orange clearance signs plaster the windows. Everything must go. Inside, empty shelves echo. The restaurant is gutted. Zeddy is gone. Within months, a Target logo will replace the familiar Zellers sign. And within 2 more years, that Target will also be gone, leaving nothing but an empty big box grave. How does this happen? How does a profitable, beloved, nationally dominant retail chain with 82 years of history simply vanish in less than 2 years? How do you destroy something Canadians loved? The answer is more disturbing than bankruptcy or competition. Zellers didn't fail. Zellers was sacrificed, dismantled deliberately, sold off for real estate, and the people who killed it were the very ones who owned it. This isn't a story about a struggling retailer losing to Amazon or Walmart. In 2010, Zellers was profitable. Customers still filled the stores. The brand was strong. This is a story about corporate strategy that values real estate over brand equity, about American ambitions in the Canadian market, and about a beloved Canadian institution that was destroyed not because it had to be, but because someone decided it should be. Where did our Zellers memories go? They were sold to Target for $1.8 billion, converted to red bullseyes, and then abandoned entirely when Target failed spectacularly in Canada. Today, when you drive past those empty buildings, you're looking at the physical evidence of one of the most destructive retail decisions in Canadian history. This is not just about a discount store chain. This is about the erasure of Canadian retail identity. It's about Bay Street corporate ownership destroying Main Street brand loyalty. It's about short-term real estate profits prioritized over long-term retail presence. It's about the moment Canadians realized that even our most familiar, most trusted, most Canadian retailers could be dismantled overnight by executives in boardrooms who never worked a shift on the sales floor. When Zellers died, so did something intangible but real. The belief that Canadian retail institutions were permanent, that stores that served generations would always be there, that corporate owners actually cared about the brand and the people who shopped there. The Zellers story still echoes today. It's why Canadians were so skeptical when Target arrived. It's why empty anchor spaces haunt malls across the country. It's why every retail closure now carries the shadow of betrayal, because we watched a profitable, beloved chain get sacrificed for a failed American experiment. This is about loyalty, about trust, about the social contract between retailers and communities, and about what happens when corporations decide that contract doesn't matter anymore. The Zellers story begins not with grand ambitions, but with Jewish immigrants and five-and-dime pragmatism. In 1931, the depths of the Great Depression, Walter P. Zeller opened his first store in London, Ontario. It wasn't glamorous. It was 5,000 square feet of bargain merchandise, modeled after American variety stores like Woolworth's and Kresge's. But Zeller understood something crucial. Canadians wanted value without sacrifice. Quality goods at fair prices. No frills, no pretension. That first store sold everything from sewing notions to candy, housewares to toys. Prices were marked clearly. Everything was self-serve. which was still novel in 1931 when most stores kept merchandise behind counters. Customers loved it. Here was a store that treated them like adults, that trusted them to touch the merchandise, that competed on price rather than prestige. Through the Depression and World War II, Zeller expanded carefully. By 1952, there were 15 stores, mostly in small Ontario towns, where Eaton's and Simpson's wouldn't bother opening. Zeller targeted markets the big department stores ignored: working-class suburbs, smaller cities, places where a discount variety store could become the main shopping destination. In 1952, the business caught the attention of W.T. Grant, an American retail chain looking to expand into Canada. They purchased Zellers, but kept the name and the strategy. Under new ownership, expansion accelerated. By 1960, there were 26 stores. By 1970, 75 stores. Zellers was becoming a household name, the Canadian equivalent of America's Kmart or Woolco. Then came 1978, and the deal that would shape Zellers' destiny for the next 35 years. Hudson's Bay Company, Canada's oldest corporation, founded in 1670, purchased Zellers. Suddenly, the scrappy discount chain had the backing and resources of a retail giant. HBC saw Zellers as the perfect complement to their premium Bay stores. The Bay would serve upscale shoppers. Zellers would capture the value market. 2 brands, 1 company, all of Canada covered. It was a brilliant strategy, and for the next 20 years, it worked beautifully. The 1980s were Zellers' golden age of expansion. Shopping malls were sprouting across Canadian suburbia, and every mall needed an anchor tenant. Zellers filled that role perfectly. A big box discount store that drew families, that generated foot traffic, that made Saturday shopping a ritual. By 1980, Zellers operated 142 stores. By 1990, that number had doubled to over 300. From Newfoundland to British Columbia, if there was a shopping mall, there was probably a Zellers. The stores followed a consistent formula: 50,000 to 100,000 square feet, wide aisles, clearly marked departments, and that signature red and white color scheme. But it wasn't just about square footage. Zellers understood Canadian retail psychology. They stocked Canadian brands alongside their private labels. They adjusted inventory for regional preferences: more winter gear in Winnipeg, more rain gear in Vancouver. In Quebec, signage was properly bilingual. Prices were in Canadian dollars. No conversion mental math required. The Zellers family restaurant became a destination in itself. Located at the front of most stores, the restaurant served simple comfort food: grilled cheese sandwiches, fries with gravy, breakfast all day. The coffee was cheap and endless. For seniors, it became a social hub. For families, it was lunch during marathon shopping trips. The restaurant wasn't about gourmet food. It was about affordability and familiarity. Then, in 1987, Zellers introduced the innovation that would define the brand: Club Z, Canada's first major retail loyalty program. Shoppers earned points on every purchase, redeemed for merchandise. It sounds simple now, but in 1987, it was revolutionary. Suddenly, shopping at Zellers wasn't just about price. It was about belonging. You had your Club Z card. You tracked your points. You were part of the club. By 1995, Club Z had 10 million members, 1/3 of Canada's entire population. Think about that. In a country of 30 million people, 10 million carried a Zellers loyalty card. It wasn't just a discount store anymore. It was a Canadian institution. The advertising reinforced this: "Where the lowest price is the law" became one of Canada's most recognized slogans. Television commercials featured everyday Canadian families, not glamorous models. Zellers wasn't aspirational. It was relatable. It was your neighbor's store, your community store. And Zeddy the Bear sealed the deal. Introduced in 1991, this cheerful mascot greeted kids at the entrance, appeared in television commercials, and starred on shopping bags. Every Canadian kid in the 90s knew Zeddy. He made Zellers fun. He made a discount store feel friendly. By 2000, Zellers operated 350 stores coast to coast, generating $4.2 billion in annual sales, employing 35,000 Canadians. It was the second largest discount retailer in Canada after Walmart, and in many markets, it was still the dominant player. Zellers wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. But beneath the success, cracks were forming that would eventually shatter everything. Let's talk about what made Zellers different from every other discount retailer: the restaurant. This wasn't an afterthought or a mall food court booth. The Zellers family restaurant was a deliberate, integrated part of the shopping experience, and it transformed Zellers from a store into a community gathering place. Picture the typical layout. You walk through the front doors, and immediately to your right is the restaurant. 20 to 30 tables, a long lunch counter with swivel stools, and a menu board advertising Big Z Burger Combo, $4.99. The decor was nothing special. Laminate tables, vinyl booths, the same fluorescent lighting as the rest of the store. But it worked. Mornings brought seniors. By 7 a.m., the coffee was brewing, and regulars claimed their spots. These weren't just customers. They were members of an informal club. Same people, same tables, same orders. Coffee and a toasted bagel, maybe a Danish if someone was feeling indulgent. They'd read newspapers, discuss local politics, complain about the weather, and catch up on neighborhood gossip. The Zellers restaurant was their social hub, and at 99 cents for endless refills, it was affordable community. Lunch brought parents with young children. After an hour of shopping, loading the cart with diapers, toys, kitchen gadgets, you needed a break. The kids needed lunch. The Zellers restaurant solved both problems. Chicken fingers and fries kept children happy, while parents finished their coffee and planned the rest of their Saturday. It was convenient, it was cheap, and it was part of the rhythm of Canadian suburban life. The menu never pretended to be sophisticated. It was comfort food, pure and simple. Burgers, grilled cheese, hot dogs, fries, poutine in Quebec stores. Breakfast featured eggs, bacon, pancakes. Everything was affordable, most items under $5. The food wasn't gourmet, but it was consistent. You knew what you'd get, and that reliability mattered. What Zellers understood, perhaps better than any retailer before or since, was that shopping is exhausting. Walking miles of aisles, comparing prices, managing children, carrying bags, it wears people down. The restaurant provided rest. It extended shopping trips. Instead of leaving after an hour because everyone was hungry and cranky, families could eat lunch, recharge, and shop for another hour. It was brilliant retail psychology. The restaurant also employed people, not just cooks and servers, but entry-level jobs for teenagers, part-time work for parents, positions for people who needed flexible hours. These jobs built resumes, taught work ethic, created connections to the community. When that restaurant closed, those jobs vanished. By the late 1990s, Zellers restaurants were serving millions of meals annually. They were profitable on their own, but more importantly, they made the stores profitable by keeping customers in the building longer, by creating positive associations, by making Zellers feel like more than just a discount store. Then, in the 2000s, corporate decisions began dismantling the restaurants. Leases with mall landlords changed. Insurance costs rose. Labor became expensive. HBC executives looked at spreadsheets and saw the restaurant as overhead, not as a customer retention strategy. Slowly, quietly, restaurants began closing or converting to generic food court concepts. Customers noticed. Regulars lost their gathering place. The store felt colder, more transactional, less like a destination. It was a small change, but it signaled something larger. Zellers was losing its identity, becoming just another discount retailer instead of the community hub it had been. When the final Zellers closed in 2013, people mourned the restaurant as much as the store. Online forums filled with memories. My grandfather went to Zellers for coffee every morning for 20 years. The grilled cheese and tomato soup was my Saturday tradition. The restaurant smelled like my childhood. That's what Zellers built with those simple restaurants, emotional connections that transcended retail transactions. And that's what was lost when corporate strategy decided those connections weren't valuable enough to preserve. January 1994 changed Canadian retail forever. Walmart, the Arkansas behemoth that had conquered American retail, crossed the border, purchasing 122 Woolco stores and converting them to Walmart locations within months. Overnight, the Canadian discount retail landscape transformed. Zellers had dominated the value market for decades, but Walmart operated on a completely different scale. Where Zellers negotiated with Canadian suppliers and distributors, Walmart leveraged global supply chains and purchasing power that dwarfed anything Canadian retailers could match. Where Zellers aimed for competitive prices, Walmart aimed for the lowest prices, and they had the infrastructure to achieve it. The price war was brutal and immediate. Walmart launched with aggressive loss leader pricing, selling key items below cost to draw customers. Laundry detergent, diapers, canned goods, anything that drove traffic was priced at margins Zellers couldn't sustain. Walmart could afford to lose money on these items because their scale and efficiency generated profits elsewhere. Zellers couldn't match it without bleeding red ink. But price wasn't the only battlefield. Walmart stores were newer, cleaner, better organized. They opened supercenters that combined discount retail with full grocery stores, one-stop shopping that Zellers couldn't compete with. They stayed open longer hours, offered more selection, and pioneered just-in-time inventory systems that minimized overstock and maximized freshness. Zellers tried to respond. They renovated older stores, upgraded inventory systems, launched price match guarantees. They emphasized Club Z loyalty points, Canadian identity, and community connections. Some of it worked. Loyal Zellers shoppers didn't abandon the brand immediately. But slowly, inexorably, market share bled to Walmart. The numbers tell the story. In 1993, before Walmart entered Canada, Zellers held 45% of the discount retail market. By 2000, that share had dropped to 30%. By 2010, it was barely 15%. Meanwhile, Walmart had grown to 35% market share and counting. Zellers was still profitable, still generating billions in sales, but the trajectory was clear and ominous. Hudson's Bay Company executives faced a dilemma. They could invest heavily in Zellers, upgrading stores, expanding product lines, improving logistics to compete with Walmart. This would require billions in capital expenditure and years of commitment. Or they could accept that Zellers would never reclaim dominance and instead focus on protecting the Bay's premium market position. They chose the latter. Through the 2000s, HBC investment in Zellers declined. Store renovations slowed. Inventory systems aged. The restaurants closed. Customer service deteriorated. Walking into a Zellers in 2010 felt like stepping back to 1995. Same worn flooring, same outdated layout, same tired presentation. Zellers wasn't failing because customers abandoned it. Zellers was failing because its owners had already given up. Customers noticed. Online reviews from 2008 to 2010 tell a consistent story. The store is always messy. Shelves are half empty. Staff seem unmotivated. It feels like nobody cares anymore. That's what underinvestment does. It becomes visible, tangible, a signal that something's wrong. Walmart, meanwhile, kept opening new locations, kept improving operations, kept driving prices down. By 2010, they operated 330 Canadian stores to Zellers' 280, down from 350 at peak. The tide had turned irreversibly. But here's the crucial point. Even in 2010, Zellers was still profitable. The store still generated positive cash flow. Customers still shopped there, still used their Club Z cards, still felt loyalty to the brand. Zellers wasn't failing in the traditional sense. It was diminished, certainly, facing structural headwinds, undoubtedly, but it was viable. That's what makes what happened next so devastating. Because Zellers didn't close due to bankruptcy or market failure. Zellers was deliberately destroyed by its own parent company in pursuit of a different strategy entirely, one that would prove catastrophically wrong. January 13th, 2011. Hudson's Bay Company announces that it's selling the Zellers chain to Target Corporation for $1.825 billion. Specifically, HBC is selling the leases to 220 Zellers store locations, the real estate rights, not the business itself. Target will convert these stores to Target locations. The remaining Zellers stores will continue operating under HBC, but the brand is effectively finished. The financial press celebrated. HBC stock jumped. Analysts praised the strategic move. Target, one of America's most successful retailers, was finally entering Canada, and they were doing it by acquiring turnkey locations in established shopping centers. From a corporate spreadsheet perspective, it was brilliant. From every other perspective, it was betrayal. Let's understand, what actually happened here. Hudson's Bay Company didn't sell Zellers because it was failing. They sold it because the real estate was valuable. Those 220 store locations in prime mall spots across Canada represented an asset that Target desperately wanted and was willing to pay premium prices for. HBC saw an opportunity to monetize real estate that they'd been sitting on for decades, real estate that was generating retail revenue but could generate a massive one-time cash infusion if sold. Target, for their part, saw Canada as their next growth frontier. The American market was saturated. International expansion was the path to continued growth. Canada was appealing. Similar culture, English-speaking mostly, geographically adjacent, with a population hungry for American retail brands. Target executives believed they could replicate their U.S. success north of the border. The Zellers leases provided instant infrastructure, locations already zoned for retail, already integrated into shopping centers, already generating customer traffic. But here's what both companies missed. Zellers wasn't just real estate. It was a brand with 80 years of equity. It was Club Z members who earned and spent points religiously. It was employees who'd worked there for decades. It was communities where Zellers was the shopping destination. You can't just erase that and replace it with red bullseyes. HBC's strategy revealed their true priorities. They weren't retailers anymore. They were real estate portfolio managers. The stores were assets to be monetized, not businesses to be nurtured. The customers were data points, not relationships. The employees were overhead, not people. Target's announcement came with promises. We'll bring the Target experience Canadians have been asking for. Our stores will offer the same great prices, quality, and style Target is known for. The subtext was clear. Zellers was inferior, outdated, something Canadians would happily trade up from. Canadian shoppers weren't so sure. Social media erupted. Facebook groups formed to memorialize Zellers. Reddit threads debated the deal. The dominant emotion wasn't excitement, it was loss. I grew up shopping at Zellers. Where will I use my Club Z points? What about all the people who work there? And the employees? 35,000 people worked for Zellers. Target announced they'd hire 17,500 people for their new Canadian stores. Half as many jobs. The rest? Terminated. Decades of retail experience, customer relationships, institutional knowledge, discarded because Target wanted to build their own culture, their own systems, their own staff. The conversion process began in 2012. One by one, Zellers stores closed for renovation. For a few months, there'd be fencing, construction noise, contractors gutting the interior. Then the Target would open. Bright red, ultra-modern, completely different. Everything Zellers had been, the layout, the merchandise, the feeling, was erased. Walking into a converted Target was disorienting. Same building, same parking lot, but nothing inside was familiar. The departments were rearranged. The products were different. The prices were higher, significantly higher. Target wasn't competing with Walmart on price. They were positioning as affordable chic, a step above discount. The problem? Canadians shopping at Zellers had wanted discount. They didn't need chic. Target's Canadian launch was a disaster from day one. Stores opened with empty shelves because supply chain logistics failed. Prices were 20 to 30% higher than US Target stores, angering Canadians who'd crossed the border for years. The merchandise selection was narrow. Inventory systems crashed. Customers came once, found the experience disappointing, and didn't return. Meanwhile, the remaining Zellers stores, the 75 or so locations HBC kept, were in limbo. Corporate investment stopped entirely. These stores were on death watch, operating only until HBC could negotiate lease terminations or find alternative uses. Shopping at a remaining Zellers in 2012 was depressing. Picked over merchandise, demoralized staff, the feeling of shopping in a retail ghost. The last Zellers closed January 2013. The Kipling Avenue location in Toronto, the final holdout, shut its doors. Employees held a small, informal gathering. Customers bought final souvenirs. And then it was over. 82 years of Canadian retail history erased. But the story doesn't end there, because Target's Canadian adventure was about to fail spectacularly, making the destruction of Zellers even more tragic. Target opened its first Canadian stores in March 2013 with enormous fanfare. 24 locations launched simultaneously, all converted Zellers stores. Target executives projected confidence. CEO Greg Steinhafel declared Canada would be a phenomenal success. Analysts predicted Target would reach $6 billion in Canadian sales within 5 years. By January 2015, less than 2 years later, Target Canada filed for bankruptcy, announcing all 133 stores would close immediately. The failure was total, spectacular, and completely avoidable. And it left behind empty big box buildings across Canada like tombstones marking where Zellers used to be. What went wrong? Everything. Start with pricing. Target Canada's prices were 20 to 30% higher than Target USA, destroying their value proposition. Canadians who'd shopped at Target stores in Buffalo or Detroit were furious. The same items that cost $14.99 in Michigan cost $19.99 in Ontario. Target blamed Canadian import costs, higher rents, smaller scale. Customers didn't care about excuses. They felt ripped off. Then there was inventory. Stores opened with empty shelves, sections blocked off with fencing, entire departments missing merchandise. Target's Canadian supply chain simply didn't work. Orders went unfulfilled. Shipments arrived late or not at all. Inventory systems crashed. Walking into Target Canada was like shopping in a going out of business sale, except the business was barely in business. The merchandise selection was wrong. Target had succeeded in America by offering fashionable, slightly upscale products at reasonable prices, the cheap chic formula. But the Canadian selection was narrow, generic, and didn't account for Canadian preferences. Where was the outerwear for minus 30 degrees Celsius winters? Where were the brands Canadians knew and trusted? Why did the home goods look like clearance items? Store locations compounded the problems. Target paid premium prices for prime Zellers leases, then discovered many were in struggling malls or secondary markets. They were contractually obligated to operate stores in locations that would never generate sufficient traffic. Each underperforming store bled money. Canadian logistics defeated Target. The company had mastered supply chain management in America, but Canada presented unique challenges: vast distances, smaller population density, bilingual packaging requirements, metric measurements, different regulatory standards. Target tried to adapt American systems rather than building Canadian-specific infrastructure. Nothing worked properly. Marketing missed the mark. Target's advertising emphasized how different they were from Zellers, modern, stylish American. But Canadians didn't hate Zellers. They'd shopped there for decades. Telling them Target was superior to the store they'd loved felt condescending. Add Target's tone-deaf emphasis on bringing Target to Canada, as if Canadians had been desperately waiting, and the campaign alienated more people than it attracted. The numbers were catastrophic. Target Canada lost $941 million in 2013, another $2 billion in 2014. Sales per square foot were 60% below projections. Customer traffic was anemic. Surveys showed only 25% of Canadians who tried Target Canada planned to return. The business model was unsalvageable. On January 15th, 2015, Target announced the end. All 133 Canadian stores, 17,600 employees, terminated. The company would absorb a $5.4 billion loss and retreat entirely from Canada. CEO Brian Cornell acknowledged an unfortunate reality that our Canadian business has not been profitable since we opened. For Canadians, the emotion wasn't schadenfreude at Target's failure. It was anger and grief. Zellers had been destroyed for this. HBC had sold off a profitable, beloved Canadian brand so Target could bumble into Canada unprepared, waste billions of dollars, employ half as many people, and then abandon the whole thing after 18 months. Employees faced unemployment for the second time in 3 years. Communities lost retail anchors and tax revenue. Shopping centers grappled with massive vacancies. And across Canada, empty big box buildings stood as monuments to corporate incompetence and retail arrogance. The Target Canada failure is studied in business schools as a case study in botched expansion. But for Canadians who lived through it, the lesson was simpler and more bitter. Our retail institutions can be destroyed on a whim by executives who don't understand or care about what they're dismantling. Drive through any Canadian suburb today and you'll see them. Massive empty buildings, former retail anchor stores, recognizable by their size and prominent mall locations. Many were Zellers. Some briefly became Target. Now they're vacant, chain-link fences around the entrances, parking lots cracking from neglect. These ghost stores tell the story more powerfully than any statistics. They're physical evidence of retail destruction, corporate failure, and broken community bonds. At Scarborough Town Center, the former Zellers/Target sits dark. Mall foot traffic flows past, but nobody enters. The space is too large, too expensive, too complicated for most retailers. Occasionally, temporary tenants move in. Halloween costume stores, seasonal furniture sales, but they're stopgaps, not solutions. The building remains fundamentally empty. In Guelph, the former Zellers became Target, then closed, then sat vacant for 3 years. Finally, in 2018, it was demolished entirely. The space remains empty parking lot. A community that once had a retail anchor now has nothing. Tax revenue gone, jobs gone, convenience gone. Across the country, landlords struggle with these vacancies. The economics are brutal. These buildings were designed as retail anchors, generating traffic for surrounding stores. Empty anchors kill mall viability. But finding replacement tenants is nearly impossible. The spaces are too large for most retailers. Subdividing them is expensive. Zoning restrictions limit alternative uses. Some get converted. A few become fitness centers, furniture stores, or self-storage. But these are the exceptions. Most remain empty, decaying slowly, reminders of what was lost. The human cost extends beyond unemployed retail workers. When Zellers closed, so did gathering places for seniors who met for morning coffee. Disappeared were convenient shopping destinations for families without cars. Gone were entry-level jobs for teenagers. These losses don't appear in financial statements, but they matter to communities. Former Zellers employees share stories online about driving past their old stores, feeling waves of nostalgia and anger. I worked there for 15 years. That was my first job. I met my wife working at Zellers. The stores were more than employers. They were part of people's life stories. The ghost stores also represent opportunity lost. Imagine if HBC had invested in Zellers instead of selling it off. Updated stores, improved inventory systems, better integration with online retail. Zellers could have evolved, adapted, survived. Instead, corporate strategy chose quick profit over long-term value, and now we have empty buildings. Target's failure made these vacancies inevitable, but Zellers' destruction made them possible. That's the tragedy. If Zellers had continued operating, 220 stores would still be open today, still employing people, still serving communities. Instead, we have ghost stores, monument to the day Canadian retail sovereignty was sold for $1.8 billion and an American expansion fantasy. Today, if you search Zellers online, you'll find something unexpected: thriving nostalgia communities. Facebook groups with tens of thousands of members sharing memories, photos, stories. Reddit threads debating the best Zellers restaurant menu items. Instagram accounts posting vintage advertisements and interior photos. This isn't just retail nostalgia, it's grief for a lost piece of Canadian identity. People share incredibly specific memories: the smell of the popcorn machine at the entrance, the layout of the toy department at Christmas, my grandmother's Club Z card, worn soft from years in her wallet. These details matter because they represent connection, belonging, tradition. Zeddy the Bear has become an icon of this nostalgia. Original Zeddy plush toys sell on eBay for hundreds of dollars. People collect Zeddy merchandise, shopping bags, promotional items, employee pins. There's something poignant about adults buying childhood toys, trying to preserve memories of simpler times. The Zellers restaurant occupies particular space in Canadian memory. People don't miss fine dining. They miss the ritual, the community, the affordability. Coffee and a toasted bagel for under $2. Chicken fingers that my kids actually ate without complaining. The booth where Dad sat every Saturday reading the paper. These memories are about more than food. They're about place, routine, belonging. In 2019, Hudson's Bay Company acknowledged this nostalgia by bringing back some Zellers merchandise at the Bay. Zeddy plush toys, Zellers branded clothing, retro promotional items. It was a small gesture, more marketing than resurrection, but Canadians responded enthusiastically. The merchandise sold out quickly. People wanted physical tokens of their memories. Some see this nostalgia as sentimental foolishness. It was just a discount store, they say. Why are people so emotional about a place to buy cheap goods? But they're missing the point. Zellers wasn't just retail. It was infrastructure for Canadian suburban life. It was where families shopped, where communities gathered, where ordinary Canadians accessed affordable goods. When it vanished, so did a piece of social fabric. The intensity of this nostalgia also reflects anger at how Zellers ended. If the chain had failed naturally, unable to compete, losing money, fading slowly, the grief would be different. But Zellers was destroyed deliberately, sold off for corporate strategy, and then replaced with an American chain that immediately failed. That sequence feels like betrayal, like unnecessary loss, like something that could and should have been prevented. Younger Canadians who never shopped at Zellers still engage with the nostalgia, drawn by aesthetic and story. Zellers represented a particular era, pre-Amazon, pre-digital retail, when shopping meant physical stores and community presence. That era is gone, and Zellers' absence marks its passing. The Zellers story offers brutal lessons about retail, corporate strategy, and the price of short-term thinking. Lesson 1. Brand equity is real value, not just intangible sentiment. Hudson's Bay Company treated Zellers as a real estate portfolio, not a brand. They focused on the monetary value of store leases while ignoring the value of customer loyalty, employee expertise, and community connections. When they sold those leases to Target, they monetized the real estate but destroyed the brand. The $1.8 billion they received was one-time revenue. The ongoing revenue Zellers generated, $4 billion annually, was permanent. HBC traded permanent income for temporary gain. Underinvestment is visible and fatal. Through the 2000s, HBC stopped investing in Zellers. Store renovations declined. Technology lagged. Customer service deteriorated. This wasn't invisible. Shoppers noticed. Online reviews documented the decline. Employees felt it. Underinvestment signals that owners have given up, and customers respond by shopping elsewhere. If you own a retail brand, you must invest in it or close it. Half measures just bleed the brand slowly. You cannot replace community institutions with corporate formulas. Target assumed Canadian shoppers would embrace their brand because it was better than Zellers. More modern, more stylish, more American. They didn't understand that Zellers represented relationships built over decades. The Club Z members who'd accumulated points for years. The employees who'd worked there through multiple generations. The families who'd made Zellers part of their Saturday routine. You can't replicate that with marketing campaigns and store renovations. Community loyalty is earned over time, not manufactured overnight. International expansion requires local adaptation. Target tried to import their American model wholesale to Canada. Same inventory, same pricing strategy, same store layouts, same logistics. But Canada isn't America. The market is smaller, more spread out, with different preferences and regulations. Successful international expansion requires genuine adaptation, not superficial localization. Target learned this lesson at the cost of $5.4 billion. Retail is fundamentally about people, not just transactions. Every analysis of Zellers' death focuses on financial metrics, real estate values, market share percentages. But the human cost was enormous. 35,000 jobs lost when Zellers closed. Another 17,600 when Target failed. Communities lost shopping destinations. Seniors lost gathering places. Families lost affordable convenience. These costs don't appear on balance sheets, but they're real. Retail decisions affect real people, and corporations that ignore this pay reputation costs. Sometimes the status quo is valuable. In 2010, Zellers was profitable, but not growing. It faced competition from Walmart, but maintained market presence. HBC executives saw stagnation. But stagnation isn't always bad. Sometimes it's stability. Zellers provided steady revenue, employed thousands, served communities. That had value. Destroying it in pursuit of growth, via the Target deal, resulted in neither growth nor stability. Sometimes the best strategy is maintaining what works. Corporate owners must understand what they own. Hudson's Bay Company never seemed to understand Zellers' true value proposition. They saw discount retail, generic bargain shopping, something lower class than the Bay. They missed the community hub aspect, the loyalty program's engagement, the restaurant's social function. Because they misunderstood the brand, they made decisions that destroyed it. You cannot successfully manage what you don't genuinely comprehend. These lessons apply beyond Zellers. Every retail closure, every corporate acquisition, every brand destruction follows similar patterns. Sears Canada, Future Shop, A&P Blockbuster, different circumstances, same core dynamic, corporate owners prioritizing short-term financial engineering over long-term brand value. The Zellers story is a warning, not just a tragedy. It shows what happens when financial logic overrides retail wisdom, when boardrooms make decisions that sales floors have to live with, when brand equity is treated as expendable. There's a space in Canadian retail memory where Zellers used to be, not just physical space, though the empty buildings remain, but cultural space, the default option, the reliable choice, the store where everybody shopped. That space hasn't been filled. Walmart occupies part of it, but Walmart is American, corporate, transactional. Canadian Tire serves different needs. Dollarama is too limited. The Bay is too upscale. There's no true Zellers replacement because Zellers was unique. Canadian-owned, initially, community-focused, affordable without being cheap, convenient without being impersonal. What makes the loss particularly painful is its unnecessariness. Zellers didn't fail. It was killed. Dismantled by its own corporate parent, sold to an American chain that immediately fumbled, leaving nothing behind but empty buildings and angry memories. The Zellers story is about more than retail. It's about the erosion of Canadian institutions, about corporate ownership that doesn't care about legacy or community, about the moment Canadians realized that even beloved, profitable, nationally dominant brands can disappear overnight if someone decides there's money to be made in their destruction. Today, Hudson's Bay Company itself struggles. They closed stores, sold assets, barely avoided bankruptcy. The corporate geniuses who sold Zellers for short-term gain couldn't save their own flagship chain. Meanwhile, empty buildings across Canada remain, physical evidence of retail destruction, monuments to corporate incompetence. If you're old enough to remember Zellers, you remember more than a store. You remember Saturday mornings, Christmas shopping, the smell of the restaurant, Zeddy the Bear, your Club Z card. You remember when Canadian retail felt permanent, when stores served communities rather than real estate portfolios. That Zellers is gone. It's not coming back. But its memory persists, and maybe that's the final lesson. You can destroy a brand, close the stores, erase the signage, but you cannot erase what people remember. Cannot delete the role Zellers played in Canadian life. Cannot undo the connections it created. The death of Zellers destroyed a store, but it couldn't destroy what Zellers meant to the people who loved it. That survives. That echoes. That remains, stubbornly, in the empty space where Zellers used to be.